The Murder Shelf Book Club contains disturbing content related to real-life crimes. Listener discretion is advised.
The beginning of the new relationship was a whirlwind. Emile was like no one I had met before, and he utterly charmed me. Even though we'd only known each other for a few weeks, we were inseparable, and I was eager to learn all about his past. He had taken me out for evening drinks, and as we sat by the bar, he told me all about the months he had spent settling into life in the UK, working in bars and restaurants. From I Survived, A True Story by Victoria Cilliers. Welcome to the Murder Shelf Book Club podcast. I am your host, Jill. I hope your Halloween was spooky and fun. We were enterprising this year, and we had a Star Trek-themed party with our own tent forward, fully engaged, complete with shots of Romulan ale. So I hope you had an equally wonderful Halloween and a Day of the Dead, too. This is episode 142. We just clicked on the book, I Survived, A True Story by Victoria Cilliers. This case takes place in the UK in 2015, and I did not remember hearing about it at the time, which made me want to feature the book all the more. But first, I'd like to toast my new Patreon murder bookies. Welcome Michelle Z and Christy S. Thank you for the support. It is deeply appreciated. Now, you all can join Patreon too. It's $2 to $4 a month. And in addition to picking out the next book I'll feature on the podcast, we talk all things true crime, and I am teaching my serial killer class. Okay, so enough bookkeeping. Let's do this. Victoria Cilliers published her book in 2020. This is an intense personal story told from her perspective, as she was shocked to find herself engrossed in trauma, recovery, and then utter devastation as her life shredded before her eyes. Coming in at an intense 288 pages, Victoria shares what it was like growing up in Scotland, while much of her story takes place in Haddington, England. Her book was adapted into a docudrama, The Fall, the Skydive murder plot, which received great reviews, but is currently only available in the UK. So I haven't seen it yet, but I plan to when hubby and I are in Scotland next October. So I can't wait. Oh, and I have a map on my blog that will help the geographically challenged Americans so that we can follow along where we are in this twisting tale. And to better highlight this case for our book club, I have found a delicious appetizer, air-fried Scottish eggs. It is breakfast or it is a wonderful appetizer. You can pick. It's very simple. You wrap hard-boiled eggs in ground sausage. Then you roll them in flour, beaten eggs, and panko. You plop them in an air fryer for 12 minutes, and you rotate them when they're halfway done. And I made a bold choice. I decided to skip the wine today, and instead I am pairing our eggs with sweet and salty Scottish coffee. Also, very easy to make. You mix coffee with Johnny Walker Black Label and salted caramel, and then you top it with heavy cream. Listen, if Black Label is too pricey, feel free to substitute it with another Johnny Walker version. And I want to thank allrecipes.com and johnnywalker.com for these terrific recipes. Links to them and all of my sources, photographs, articles, and whatnot are on my blog at www.murdershelfbookclub.com, November 2025. So we have our food, we have our drink, So bon appetit, murder bookies. Let's delve into I Survived, which is truly a miracle of a story. So while studying physiotherapy in Glasgow, Scotland, Americans think physical therapy, Vicky's best friend Katie invited her to a presentation on officer training for the Royal Army Medical Corps. Well, Vicky had never really considered joining the military, but she thought the afternoon might be fun. Quote, as soon as the presentation began, with action shots flashing across the screen, the prospect of excitement and service in the military captured my mind, end quote. Could she really do this? Yes, she thought I could. It sounded amazing. And she knew her dad would support her decision, as both her paternal grandparents had served, and she would be continuing a family tradition. Born in 1975 in Edinburgh's West General Hospital, Vicky grew up in a loving home with her Scottish mom, a former nurse, and her father from Devon, who worked in information systems. The family included her younger brother, Christopher, and they enjoyed a close bond having dinner together every night. When she and Christopher went out during the day, adults were rarely around, and Vicky pursued her passion for horseback riding. When Vicky and Christopher were 14 and 10 years old, respectively, they noticed a tension and whispers between their parents. They felt uneasy, realizing that something was definitely going on, but their parents were not sharing any details. Vicky recalled, quote, I decided to play along with them. In the safe haven of our family home, I was content with our life in Haddington and terrified of anything bursting our little bubble, end quote. But finally, one Saturday morning, the bubble did burst. Their dad explained that their mom had bowel cancer. Frozen, Vicky withdrew into herself as she listened to the treatment plan, trying to avoid the terrifying emotions that threatened her well-being. Surgery and chemotherapy followed, bringing a swell of hope as everyone prayed for good news. To cope with the situation, the kids immersed themselves in extracurricular activities. Vicky became the Army cadets' first female drummer, all while listening to Metallica and Nirvana drumming along. Mom remained resilient, making the kids lunches and trying to maintain a sense of normalcy. A few years later, the family was planning a holiday to Hawaii to create some happy memories, realizing it was possibly their last as a family of 4. The cancer had certainly taken its toll. Struggling to accept the reality that Mom was going to die, Vicky just wasn't ready to confront it. Instead, she insisted on going to an equestrian camp. Well, brokenhearted, her parents finally agreed. And a few weeks after the Hawaii trip, Mom was moved to hospice care. In denial, Vicky never fully acknowledged that there was no longer any hope. And during one of these visits, Mom asked her what she planned to do with the rest of her life. Well, Vicky loved horses, but since her grades were only average, becoming a veterinarian seemed unrealistic. Well, perhaps she would consider studying physiotherapy instead. And Mom smiled, relaxing as she listened. And in that moment, Vicky understood why she had asked that question. She needed to know that her girl's future would be a good one. In September, a month before Vicky's 16th birthday, Mom finally passed away. Dad, Vicky, and Chris were in shock, nodding to the many "we're sorry for your loss" comments. Her grandparents came to stay for a while, helping Dad to manage things. Much like Vicky, Dad withdrew into himself, ignoring the empty chair at their table. Vicky picked up the slack, trying to cook, wash, and clean. It was the saddest time of her life, as each family member sought refuge in their bedrooms. But one day, Vicky noticed a flyer at school about a charity parachute jump and immediately knew she wanted to participate. She decided to raise money for bowel cancer research in honor of her mom. Dad expressed support, recalling how much he had enjoyed the jumps he made as a teenager. While 60 students showed up on the first day, Only 5 made it to jump day at Langer Airfield. Staying in the bunkhouse brought a mix of socializing and nervous butterflies. Tandem diving with an instructor, they boarded the tiny plane. As they leveled off, the chatter faded. They were asked, "Are we ready?" as thumbs popped up. Terrified, Vicky shuffled to the door and peered out at the sky. It was too late to back out now, and she tipped forward and jumped into the unknown. Quote, "All my anxiety washed away. It was amazing. The icy air rushed past me, almost burning the sides of my face, and right then, a couple thousand feet above any of life's worries, I felt utter freedom. It was euphoric. We fell freely for a few seconds before a sharp jolt snapped us out of the air and the parachute opened." End quote. Landing safely, the adrenaline rushed, and she wanted to do it again, a new passion igniting. Four years later, Vicky was in physiotherapy training. She had a postgraduate job set at the local hospital. She had good friends and was living with her boyfriend. And she was less than inspired by this neatly mapped out life that laid before her. Thus, the idea of joining the Army intrigued her. Breaking the news to her boyfriend was tough, but she knew it was the right choice. And after 6 months, she packed her things into her Nissan Micra and drove south, leaving Glasgow and her dad, with his new wife, Frances, behind. The Royal Military Academy at Sandhurst was intimidating, tough, yet thrilling for Vicky. Did she have the internal fortitude to be an officer? Well, assessments began immediately. This packed schedule left little time for breaks, with minimal sleep. The strong friendships quickly forged were essential for coping. Each week, she called her dad, feeling hungry and exhausted from the constant demands of training, which included military medicine, infantry skills, leadership, and weapon handling. When her family visited, Vicky felt proud to see them from the parade grounds. Though she hoped to be stationed closer to them in Scotland, she was assigned to HMS Drake in Plymouth, about an 8-hour drive away. And again, check out the map on my blog if you're uncertain with UK geography. Now, while Vicky was embarking on her Army career, she was initially stationed at a naval base. So everything felt slightly off, and she found herself feeling homesick. She divided her time between Derryford Hospital and the quiet, subdued naval base. 7 months later, she was transferred to Aldershot, a 5-hour drive east. On January 1st, Vicky began working at Frimley Park Hospital. It is crucial for military healthcare workers to maintain their skills during times when they are not deployed. Well, she expected the hospital to be a ghost town and was pleasantly surprised to discover holiday festivities in full swing. And she reunited with some friends, a group of people she had trained with during Phase 1. Life in Aldershot quickly proved to be far more enjoyable than her time at HMS Drake. And shortly after her arrival, she met Brett. Now, at that time, the world was closely watching the conflicts in the Balkans, and by 1999, Kosovo had become ground zero. In June of that year, the 1st Parabattle Group, part of the 5th Airborne Brigade, was deployed to northern Macedonia to secure the road to Pristina, the capital city in Kosovo. A peace plan had been brokered between Serbia and the Kosovar Albanians who were seeking independence, which was finally achieved in 2008. Serbian troops withdrew, and KFOR, for Kosovo Force, made up of British, American, French, German, and Italian, and after some initial challenges, Russian troops entered the region. Arriving in Skopje, Macedonia, a large bus transported everyone to the base in northern Kosovo. The stakes were high due to landmines scattered across the countryside, and the condition of the roads was often quite questionable. Now, full disclosure, my husband was part of the American Initial Entry Force entering Kosovo, so he and Vicky were in country at the same time. I first visited Kosovo a year after them in the summer of 2000, so certain parts of Vicky's book really resonated with me. I distinctly remember the anxiety, the sounds, the smells, and a lot of burning, which included homes. The presence of landmines remained a significant concern. In Lipion, a small town east of Pristina, the British had commandeered a gym-like building to serve as a medical ward, with 3 segregated lines of beds, one for Serbs, one for Albanians, with NATO personnel in between. Quote, "My 4 months working in Kosovo were my first real exposure to just how evil people can be. One by one, patients would be rushed into the hospital, the effects of what Serbs and Albanians were doing to each other etched on their bodies in the form of bullet wounds, bloody clothes, and missing limbs." End quote. Children were often the victims of landmines, which blew up as they play in fields. While I was there, a cow blew up, and it was just god-awful. The conditions were primitive with no running water or electricity. Vicky and 5 nurses were assigned a room in a concrete building. They found a dusty space with no glass windows and dirty bed frames without mattresses, with brown smears on the walls. After cleaning it up, they discovered plastic sheets that they used to cover the windows. Sleeping rolls and blankets would serve as their bedding, and their uniforms were hung on ropes. Fortunately, Vicky's boyfriend, Brett, worked in logistics and was able to provide them with a solar shower. I recall that power was still erratic when I was there, going on and off from the single source that was in the region. Water came in bottles, and having a flashlight or torch was essential. And it was hot, 100 to 120 degrees Fahrenheit, or 44 to 48 Celsius. Yeah, it was hot. Vicky, a physiotherapist, conducted clinics in various locations rather than bringing soldiers to her warehouse. Always armed, her initial nervous jitters gradually faded as life began to return to some semblance of normality, especially after the Gurkhas were brought in for additional security. Now, during this time in Kosovo, tragic deaths were an everyday occurrence, and Vicky witnessed firsthand how a once thriving village had been burnt to the ground, the perpetrators thinking that if their homes were gone, then the people wouldn't come back. But nevertheless, people did return and began rebuilding. One of Vicky's patients was a 10-year-old girl who had been shot in the wrist. Suffering from severe trauma, she was mute, and she required physiotherapy to regain control of that wrist. And the backstory was heartbreaking. Vicky learned that the girl and her 7-year-old sister had survived a horrific attack while the majority of the family was lined up and executed in front of them. The sister had been shot in the shoulder, leaving a hideous scar, but her arm remained functional. Vicky worked with the child for weeks, and the girl gradually regained motion in her wrist, but she still did not speak. Just as Vicky was starting to gain the child's trust, she was scheduled to rotate out and swap positions with another team. It was time for her to head home. Transitioning back to the UK was harder for Vicky than expected, a common challenge for returning military personnel. She felt infuriated by the trivial annoyances of those around her, unable to understand how they could overlook the horrors that were happening just hours away. It took months for this anger to ebb. After being promoted to captain at the Defense Medical Rehab Center in Headley Court near Ipswich, she was really emotionally drained after caring for patients with complex injuries. To cope better with the daily stressors, a friend suggested adventure training, and one caught her attention: a parachute course. She had loved it that first time. Well, unfortunately, due to bad weather, she ended up watching videos of parachuting, and the free falls captivated her. Quote, "They looked like aerial gymnasts spinning through the air at extreme speeds, and I was stunned by how carefree they seemed." End quote. As the weather cleared and jumps resumed, Vicky realized she hated static line skydiving. With static lines attached to her back, they would climb to 3,000 feet as the plane flew in circles. When you jumped, the static line would tighten automatically, deploying the parachute, but the circling before this made her feel nauseous. As instructors grew loud, shouting orders, Vicky grew more terrified, especially as everyone rushed towards the doors, hurrying up. After a few jumps, her discomfort increased. It didn't lessen, and she was really upset. But then an instructor offered to take her for a free fall jump, and Vicky eagerly accepted. This time, as they ascended, the atmosphere felt calm. The jumpers were relaxed, enjoying themselves until they reached 13,000 feet. Then, one by one, they exited the plane, leaving Vicky with her two instructors. They took a hold of her arms and together jumped out the door. Vicky felt an overwhelming sense of euphoria as they free fell. When she deployed her parachute, she experienced complete weightlessness, laughing aloud into the wind. This was freedom, and she was completely hooked. Now Vicky spent every spare moment learning about parachuting, which was central to her social life. She often stayed at the bunkhouse or camped in tents with the gang, enjoying life together. Boyfriend Brett wasn't a jumper, and he realized that he needed to learn if he wanted to be with Vicky. 2 years into their relationship, they traveled to Scotland for Brett to meet her dad and Frances, and he made a great impression, fitting in well, leading Vicky to wonder if he was the one. He seemed perfect, and she loved him. During the visit, Brett developed a fascination with Edinburgh Castle. They just had to go. Well, unbeknownst to Vicky, Brett had everything arranged with the guards at the gate, and arriving at sunset, they climbed to the top of the castle, and they were met with an incredible view of the city. There, Brett dropped to one knee and proposed. The ring was beautiful and sparkling. It was textbook romantic and perfect. But Vicky felt a slight unease and paused. Did she truly want to marry Brett? But she blurted out yes, not wanting to leave him in suspense, as the ring slid onto her finger. Soon, life became a whirlwind. Brett envisioned an extravagant wedding in Sandhurst, while Vicky shuddered at the idea of walking down a long aisle as the center of attention. She would prefer to get married in her hometown. And it nagged her. Why had she hesitated to say yes? Jumping became the only thing that calmed her nerves. Meanwhile, Brett felt that her parachuting was conflicting with the wedding planning, and Vicky began to wonder why her own wedding wasn't a priority to her. In the end, Vicky decided to break off the engagement with Brett. He admitted that he had sensed her hesitation at the castle, but thought that everything would work itself out. They parted on decent terms, and Vicky realized that being in her late 20s meant she had plenty of time to marry and have kids in the future. About a year later, in 2003, while in Purebright, an Army training regiment, Vicky met Liam. Learning that this fascinating woman he had just met loved parachuting, he eagerly joined her. They quickly became close, spending their free time together, and she trusted him completely. A year later, she joyfully accepted his proposal with no hesitation this time. Everything felt right, and her family adored him. And then Liam was posted in Northern Ireland, leaving them 4 days to get married. And they decided to do so in her hometown at her church in Haddington. Later, Vicky was posted to Chilwell in Nottingham, while Liam began training as an ammunition technician, which limited him to only being home on the weekends. Though Vicky was worried, she supported her new husband, with him promising to ring her every night. After 6 months of sweet phone calls and weekend reunions, Liam and Vicky bought a small house in Oakham. However, the time apart was beginning to strain their marriage. And then one weekend, Liam couldn't make it home. Then the number of weekends missed began to increase as Vicky grew suspicious. When he was home, he was secretive with his phone covering the screen. And then one day she glimpsed the name Lucy. Now Liam insisted he would never, ever cheat, with Vicky rationalizing his behavior was a result of stress from the bomb disposal training. And eventually, this rough patch smoothed out, and he returned home as his course ended. They began to discuss starting a family, but their careers were driving them all over the place. If Vicky left the military, then she could move around with Liam, and he thought it was a really good idea. So leaving the military, Vicky began working for the Ministry of Defense in 2007, essentially doing the same job, but without the uniform. Well, one day she was at home when the landline rang, and whoever it was hung up. Then the phone rang again, but it was another hang-up. Well, after the 5th time of this, a woman with a Canadian accent spoke to Vicky, informing her that she had a fantastic husband. Red flags went up as the woman continued, saying that they were taking a course together and how much he loved her. Alarm bells went off, and Vicky asked what her name was, and the Canadian replied, Lucy. Shaking, Vicky confronted her, and eventually Lucy admitted that she and Liam had had a year-long affair, but it was over. Well, newsflash, it's obviously not over if Lucy is now calling the wife to crush her, which is horribly manipulative. Confronted, Liam confessed everything, emphasizing that he had ended the affair. He chose Vicky. Anguished, feeling betrayed, Vicky was distraught, as she had trusted him completely. Heartbroken, they both resolved to give their marriage another chance. But unfortunately, in 2008, the conflict in Afghanistan had intensified, causing Liam to be deployed for several months at a time. With the Taliban posing a constant threat to his life, he faced immense pressure. And back home, Vicky was constantly anxious, not only about his safety, but about the possibility of him cheating again. When Liam returned home, Vicky tried to set aside her worries until he became possessive and secretive about his phone again. Then she noticed a call from Emma. Now, Vicky understood that men and women can be friends, especially bonding in a war zone, but she couldn't shake her suspicions. Her concerns deepened when a friend mentioned that she and her friend Emma had run into Liam in London, and Vicky had had no idea Liam had been in London, and he had orchestrated this in order to see Emma. Vicky couldn't continue living like this. Her nerves were a wreck, so she decided to move closer to Netheravon Parachute Center and take another job, all without discussing it with Liam, who was in Afghanistan. And to this day, she still feels guilty about this choice. And I had to think, if this is the worst thing that Vicky has ever done, she really needs to let it go. Really, he's cheated on her twice. Well, their marriage was over, and she was horribly sad because she had truly believed that they would be together for the rest of their lives. Vicky immersed herself in parachute training, and in 2009 became a qualified accelerated freefall instructor. Working every weekend at Netheravon, she taught a 6-hour ground school followed by training jumps with students. If all went well, They would do 4 jumps with one instructor before moving on to low-level solo jumps, and then finally 10 consolidation jumps. This role provided her with socialization and supplemented her income, enabling her to buy a new home in Bulford. Although she always envisioned a life with husband and children, she found herself newly divorced. Quote, "My life was busy, but sometimes it felt empty too," end quote. And I think many of us can relate to that. In the winter of 2009, Vicky met Emile Cilliers as he walked into her treatment room. She recognized him from the regiment's gym, and she saw that he was a physical training instructor in the Royal Artillery. He had injured his knee during a ski trip, and it required extensive surgery. Vicky understood that his recovery would take time and that fixing his knee was essential for his plans to join the physical training corps. To motivate him, she worked to build rapport. Emile initially seemed closed off, so she sparked a discussion about skiing, sharing how exhilarating it was and compared it to her passion for skydiving. As she spoke about the feeling of flying through the air, how freeing it felt, Emile became engrossed in the conversation, his enthusiasm rising, and this was a breakthrough. Quote, "Emile was a reluctant patient, but over the next few weeks, I managed to cultivate a good working relationship with him, and he started coming in regularly for physio. Initially, there wasn't much of an attraction there. We just became genuinely good friends. But over time, Emile grew on me," end quote. Vicky writes about his piercing blue eyes, which reminded her of the clear blue skies she loved to explore. She explains that for her, it was always about personality, what motivates someone, their ambitions, their passions. In Emile, she saw a man dedicated to his career, working intensively to rehabilitate himself, and achieving his goals of joining the PTC. She admired his drive, and he wanted to excel in everything, especially sports. He was in good shape, and he worked hard to maintain it. And his talk, it translated into action. A spark began to ignite between them, and Emile revealed that he had 2 children from his previous marriage who meant everything to him. Being cautious after her own experience with Liam, he assured her that he was separated and currently living in the mess hall. When he invited her out for a drink over Facebook, Vicky agreed after transferring his care to a colleague. On their first date, he took her to Wales, where they went climbing and participated in an aerial assault course. I couldn't help but laugh while reading about this, because of course the physio and the soldier would choose such a romantic outing for their first date. But with the wind blowing through the trees, they were smiling as Vicky enjoyed his energy and enthusiasm. They had a lot in common, and it was wonderful for her to have someone in her life to share these adventures with. With him setting a high bar, Vicky picked coastering in Devon for their second date. Now this involves jumping off rocks into the sea, and she found herself feeling really cold and not enjoying the experience very much. But Emile was a strong swimmer, and he made her feel safe. They began spending hours at her house, sipping wine and talking late into the night about their hopes and dreams. They just clicked. She describes the beginning of their relationship as a whirlwind. Emile was like no one she had ever met, completely charming her. Quickly, though they had only known each other a few weeks, they became inseparable. She learned that he was from Cape Town, South Africa, and had moved to the UK as an adult seeking work experience. Emile had then stayed in the UK when his then-girlfriend Carly became pregnant. Although it hadn't been a serious relationship, he didn't want to return to South Africa and leave his child behind. Vicky liked and respected Emile's decision, concluding that this man was a good father. Even though he didn't love Carly, they married so that he could spend more time with his daughter. And after 4 years, Emile suggested that Carly return to work. but she responded by getting pregnant again. He described his ex as lazy and work-shy, which made Vicky uncomfortable given that he was speaking so negatively about the mother of his children. And alarm bells should have gone off for her, but Vicky had no concrete reason to doubt him. It was certainly possible that Carly had trapped him by getting pregnant. Their relationship continued to develop quickly, with Emile wanting to spend every moment he could with Vicky. She writes that it felt like a little bit too soon, but she couldn't help but enjoy the attention he showered on her. They worked in the same building, and he often made excuses to stop by and see her during the day, sometimes even bringing her coffee. They spent all their free time together, and Emile helped out around the house, and Vicky soon became the center of his world. After a few weeks of dating, he told her he loved her. Flushing with emotion, she loved him too. She contrasted this warmth and affection with her ex. Liam had become distant towards her due to work commitments, while Emile was canceling other plans just to spend more time with her. It felt wonderful to be a priority in someone's life, especially since she had never experienced this level of attention before. Now, right before meeting Emile, Vicky had purchased an older property that required some renovations, and now Emile moved in, since they were spending most of their nights together anyway. Then Emile announced that he wanted his kids to come over, which is a significant step. Vicky wasn't even sure she was ready to meet them, noting he hadn't asked her if she was ready or not. He spoke to Carly, and listening in, it confirmed to Vicky that their relationship had not ended well. Carly wanted to meet Vicky before involving the children, which was very understandable, and the women agreed to meet at a coffee shop, and this encounter went about as well as could be expected. They didn't discuss Emile. Instead, Carly asked Vicky about her own life, and Carly accepted that Vicky was important to Emile and agreed to bring the children around. Vicky felt a rush of excitement knowing how happy Emile would be. As they were leaving the coffee shop, Carly paused and said, quote, "Of course, well, I assume you know about the other children," end quote. Vicky blinked in shock as a wave of nausea rolled over her. Carly explained that Emile had had a girlfriend back in South Africa, and they had a couple children who now lived in the UK. Vicky was floored. How could he not have told her this? They had promised each other that they would be honest. They had discussed their pasts, and yet he had failed to disclose something this monumental, vital information. Wait, was she being oversensitive? Was he planning on telling her? But the truth was that he had concealed this from her. Confronting him, Emile jumped up, exclaiming that he hadn't known how to bring it up. Clearly hurt, Vicky reminded him that she had just left one deceitful marriage, and he looked as if he was about to cry as he explained that he was so sorry and didn't want to lose her. He insisted that he had nothing to do with these kids, that their mother had cut him off. He always intended to tell her. Calming down, Vicky reasoned that she would have met Emile's parents sooner or later, and it would certainly have come up then. So grudgingly, she accepted his explanation, but she was adamant that they had to be honest with each other moving forward, and he agreed. Now, was it a red flag that Emile never mentioned his eldest two children? Well, definitely yes. However, Vicky saw that he had a good relationship with his and Carly's children, which soothed her somewhat. Meanwhile, they began discussing the possibility of having children together. By this time, Vicky was in her mid-30s, and her biological clock was ticking. She did not want a long-term relationship without the opportunity of having children. And Emile said he was open to having children with her, and his voice filled with emotion as he spoke about it. Vicky was so head over heels in love with Emile that she decided to overlook this deception. He wanted a baby with her, and this made her ridiculously happy. His affection was intense, and she relished in the joy of being so desired. She would come home to find him cooking her meals with her favorite wine waiting for her. Post-it notes reading, "I love you so much, have a great day," were left on her cabinet, with another note inside that said, "Still love you." Emile was such a good man, warm, connecting, and affectionate. It was so different from her weekend marriage to Liam. Emile was caring and family-oriented, so his previous relationships just didn't matter to her. They shared the same hopes and dreams for the future, and he was even helping her fix up the house by taking on odd jobs. Together they felt in perfect harmony. Okay, so at this point, I want to veer off and share some insights. Experiencing intense romantic feelings so early in a new relationship may not just be about chemistry and connection. It can also be a sign of love bombing. I first heard this term from Laura Richards at CrimeCon years ago, and now I recognize it in Vicky's writing. Love bombing may feel good initially, but it is a manipulative tactic in relationships. It represents a form of psychological and emotional abuse. A person who engages in love bombing typically uses excessive flattery and praise, over-communicates their feelings, showers the recipient with unwanted gifts, and quickly initiates intense conversations about their future together. Their affection is overwhelming, often pleasant feeling at first, but it can prevent the recipient from establishing healthy boundaries. The love bomber mirrors his love interest's values and desires, appearing to be her perfect match. As the relationship develops, the recipient becomes increasingly isolated from friends and family, as he insists on spending all of their time together. This tactic is designed to gain control of Vicky in this case and create an emotional dependency. The withdrawal of affection, sulking, the silent treatment, and threatening to withhold love if she doesn't comply with his demands deepens his control over her. In this whirlwind romance, charming Emile sweeps Vicky off her feet, using her love for him to make her feel indispensable. However, once the love bomber feels secure in the relationship, the facade begins to crumble, and then he'll exhibit abusive and devaluing behavior. The Cleveland Clinic divides love bombing into 3 stages. The first is idealization. In this initial phase, the love bomber overwhelms his target with excessive love and affection to draw her in, convincing her to let her guard down. Stage 2 is devaluation. Once he feels comfortable in the relationship, red flags begin to appear, such as discovering your partner has 2 children he's failed to mention. Now he may become increasingly demanding of his target's time and start gaslighting, making her believe that any problems are caused by her. She is the problem, never him. Some individuals may resort to fear, intimidation, or even physical violence, causing a shift in the victim's behavior. And third, the discard phase. When confronted about his harmful behavior, the love bomber avoids accountability, refusing to listen, cooperate, or compromise, and may abandon the relationship. This leaves the victim feeling confused and like a failure for not being able to fix the relationship, especially since everything was so perfect during those initial months or years. So keep this progression in mind as we hear the rest of Victoria Cilliers' story. Well, it became clear that Emile was struggling with financial debts that were weighing him down. He had been reluctant to discuss the issue, because the debts were a result of his ex-wife's spending. With Carly not working, she had depleted their joint account. He looked embarrassed as he revealed this to Vicky. But Emile was working to resolve the situation, but it was going to take some time. When Vicky asked how much he owed, he explained about 2,000 pounds. Today, that amount would roughly be 3,400 pounds, which is 4,600 American dollars. Now, this wasn't an insurmountable sum, and Vicky offered to help pay off this debt for him, suggesting that he could pay her back later. He was so relieved that they would work together to get him back on his feet. Now, going to the airfield, Vicky showed Emile how to pack parachutes, and he quickly proved to be a natural at it. As a result, he was hired for the job. And soon afterwards, with the extra money he made, he repaid the 2,000 pounds as they had discussed. Now they decided to open a joint account to manage their household expenses together. In January 2011, about a year after they met, Emile and Vicky flew to South Africa for 3 weeks to introduce Vicky to his parents. They welcomed her into the family with open arms, and his parents were warm and friendly, making the visit enjoyable for all. Emile's mom conspiratorially remarked that he never spoke about anyone the way he talked about Vicky. With a grin, she added, "He really does love you," causing Vicky to blush. After that, Emile and Vicky set off to climb Table Mountain, a massive landmark that towers about 3,500 feet or 1,070 meters into the sky. The climb was challenging, even with the preparation that they had done before the trip. And after several hours in the scorching sun, Vicky was exhausted. Finally, as her humor began to fade, they reached the top. The view was incredible, but Vicky felt a wave of relief when Emile suggested they take the cable car back down. Well, despite the physical strain, they were having a wonderful time. Next on the itinerary was a visit to a cheetah sanctuary, which was utterly amazing. All right, you know how much I enjoyed wildlife CSI, so I can imagine this. Vicky cautiously pet the docile cats that often hunted cows and sheep, driving the farmers crazy. Their guide asked if there were any questions, and Emile spoke up right away. "Will you marry me?" Vicky glanced down and noticed a diamond ring attached to the cheetah's collar. Bursting into a huge smile, she accepted, choking back tears of joy. Quote, "I was finally getting the happily ever after dream I had always had. After my marriage to Liam ended, I had mourned the loss of a future and had come to terms with the fact that children may not be a factor in my life. Now all of that had changed. This time, the proposal felt right. This was meant to be." End quote. They quickly decided to marry in South Africa, as his parents would never be able to afford the cost of a flight to England. Calling her dad, he and Frances agreed that they would fly down whenever they wanted, and the rest of their holiday was spent looking for venues for that September. A few months before the big day, Vicky realized she was late. Not expecting to be pregnant, she took a test and was shocked to find out that she was. Thrilled, she embraced the news, especially now since she was 36. And Emile was over the top excited. A few weeks later, they were set to go to London for Emile's cricket match when Vicky noticed she was bleeding. A visit to the hospital revealed that she was miscarrying at 12 weeks of gestation. All too common, it devastated Vicky, who just thought this would never happen to her. And Emile was sad, but focused on cricket. When Emile asked if she thought they should still go, with Vicky saying to herself, "God, no," she was not up for an hour's drive and socializing. Emile, however, was worried about disappointing everyone because the accommodations were already booked. Sighing, Vicky was resigned that the baby was gone and nothing would change that. So she agreed to go. and he would promise that they would take it easy. As they drove to London, the pain worsened, and she prayed it would ease up once they reached the hotel. Arriving in London, she was horrified to see that they were booked into the cricket team room. With no beds, it had roll mats. A communal bathroom was downstairs. Are you kidding me? In terrible pain, she told Emile that she did not want to be here. Quote, "But we're already here now. I just can't leave them." End quote. She looked around in disbelief. "I can't sleep in this room." She was still significantly bleeding, and all the while hoping that no one noticed. As she was willing him to say that they would leave and he would make their excuses, he handed her the car keys. Driving herself back alone, she was in tears and miserable, physically and mentally. At home, she fumed that instead of supporting her, Emile was off playing cricket with his friends. What a complete jerk. He had always been so attentive, though, so this was unusual, and she blamed herself for encouraging him to go, and she told herself that he did not fully grasp the weight of losing a baby. Eventually, though, she saw that he did show a delayed reaction to the loss and was very low for a few weeks. 6 weeks later, as they set off for their wedding in South Africa, Vicky realized that she was again late. And when she checked, there were double lines on the pregnancy test. She was expecting again. Both she and Emile were over the moon, making their wedding trip even more significant. And 2 years after they met, in front of their families, they were married. Now, Emile wanted to know every detail about the pregnancy, downloading an app to track the baby's development. His excitement was obvious. Meanwhile, he'd begun his training with the Royal Army Physical Training Corps, a rigorous process that Vicky wholeheartedly supported her new husband 100%. Then a complication arose in the pregnancy. Blood was accumulating in Vicky's uterus. Occasionally, she would begin to hemorrhage and had to be rushed to the hospital. Each time, monitors indicated that tiny little heartbeat continued to beat. With the constant risk of miscarriage, Vicky felt physically and emotionally exhausted. Reaching 28 weeks of pregnancy was a relief for her, as she knew the doctors might be able to save the baby if the worst were to happen. In April 2012, Vicky was scheduled to begin her maternity leave when a scan revealed that the baby had stopped growing. The doctors presented 2 options. They could wait and see, or they could induce labor that very day at 36 weeks. Vicky and Emile chose to induce. The pain was excruciating, but finally, with a soft cry, their beautiful daughter, April, was born, weighing 4 pounds, 1 ounce, or 1.9 kilograms. Emile held their tiny daughter while Vicky was taken into surgery to remove the placenta. She thought to herself, quote, "Now I can relax. Emile will take good care of us," end quote. They stayed in the hospital for 2 weeks, during which April was eating well and gaining weight, and Emile visited every day for as long as he could. At home, settling into family life was wonderful. Emile was great with the baby, and Vicky beamed with pride and love as her dad made faces to entertain his girls, filling the room with laughter. But there was one concern. Vicky noticed small withdrawals from their joint account. She initially attributed these to the expenses that come with a newborn, but they continued. But with everything going so well, why bring it up? Their little trio would find a new normal and they would start saving again. Surely, if Emile had taken the money out, he would put it back in, she reasoned with herself, being pragmatic. Then in the mail, Vicky received a notice about a missed payment, and this she could not ignore. When she logged into her Next clothing account, she was shocked to see purchases that she didn't recognize. She hadn't ordered anything in months, Well, she'd been pregnant, right? She asked Emile if he had made any purchases on her next account, but he snapped at her in response. Quote, "Why would I do that?" Shocked by his tone, she explained about the purchases. Angry, he retorted, "You seriously think I would use your account?" Why was he so angry about her asking about this? At a loss for what to say, she said she just wondered. Quote, "Someone must have hacked into your account," he spat back, shaking his head. "I can't believe you would think I would do that." End quote. Well, she had to agree that that was possible, and she began to feel guilty for doubting him. These items had been purchased a while ago, and she had never seen Emile wearing them. So she decided to tell next that she had been hacked. "Well, I think you should." Emile's tone was cutting as he stormed out of the room. He gave her the cold shoulder for days until Vicky apologized, and then she canceled the account, although she was still liable for the money. And so it begins. Vicky tried to ignore the lingering feelings about Emile's negative reaction. However, she couldn't overlook the fact that money was now a major issue. A few months had passed, and her phone was turned off for non-payment. Checking, there was no money in the account. More red letters arrived, red indicating non-payment. Emile always offered excuses. Nosying around, she found paperwork indicating that Emile had taken out an overdraft and a loan in her name. No, he insisted. There had been a mix-up at work, and he hadn't been paid on time. His wages just weren't processed that month. Was that really why he had taken out a loan? When she raised the issue with him, he flew off the handle, furious and yelling that she didn't believe him. She wanted to confront him about it, but it just didn't seem worth the trouble. He would sulk for days, barely speaking, which made the atmosphere terribly uncomfortable. Unable to endure the tension, she would apologize, allowing their financial concerns to fester unresolved. Vicky now rationalizes. What marriage doesn't experience financial up and downs? And though she and Liam had not had this problem. She also admitted that she and Emile never argued about anything else. She would provide money for Emile to pay off the overdraft or unpaid bills, trying to clear these up, but he never applied it to the debt. Whenever she attempted to discuss it, he would respond with anger or simply ignore her. What was he doing with the money? She assumed he was funding his hobbies, climbing and cricket. If she found new equipment, he dismissed it, claiming a friend had lent it to him, and he kept things in his car or at work. Without physical evidence that he had squandered the money, she couldn't bear the stress and arguments that would ensue. She felt so confused. Should she trust her instincts or believe her husband? Well, murder bookies, I always say, trust your gut. Now, recognize we are on the outside listening to Vicky's story. We don't have a personal stake in this matter, and she did, so it's easy to be judgmental and label her as naive or foolish. However, that is really victim bashing. It is mean and it is unproductive, and I refuse to do that. Instead, I'd like to understand what might be happening. It's my opinion that Emile is gaslighting. This is emotional abuse and manipulation. Gaslighting is used to make someone doubt their own beliefs, thinking, and/or perception. Dr. Danielle Hairston, an assistant professor of psychiatry at Howard University, writes that this is manipulation. By repeatedly using specific phrases and tactics, it is trying to distract you or deflect guilt or accountability and responsibility. Sometimes it's even harsher, like someone trying to belittle you or damage or chip away at your self-esteem. And I believe that this is what's happening to Vicky. There are different types of gaslighters. Malicious gaslighting, often used by narcissists and psychopaths, occurs when a person seeks to gain or maintain control over someone, which lowers the victim's self-esteem, as we said. On the other hand, the self-protecting gaslighters, they might not intend harm or control. They simply want to avoid the consequences of their actions. They might insist that you've forgotten or can't remember something, causing one to doubt their own perceptions. Manipulative individuals can use gaslighting to minimize your feelings by suggesting that you're too emotional or completely exaggerating situations. They also shift blame and deflect by saying things like, "You misunderstand what I'm saying." Finally, the gaslighter might trivialize your concerns, making them seem unimportant. They might say, "Gee, that sounds kind of crazy, don't you think?" This leaves the victim confused, angry, unheard, insecure, and apologizing while second-guessing their own feelings and reality itself. Now, the name gaslighting comes from the 1944 film with Ingrid Bergman, and she won an Oscar for her performance. It won Best Picture in 1945. It is worth watching. Now, in the Cilliers case, when Emile lashes out angrily, he claims that Vicky's thinking is flawed. He questions, how could she think that he would have done this? She doesn't trust him. She's wrong. How could she believe he would act in such a way, asserting that her lack of trust in him is misguided? Emile is manipulating the situation to create uncertainty and confusion, leading to self-doubt for Vicky and throwing her off balance. His main goal is to act on his selfish desires with impunity while avoiding responsibility for his actions. Challenging a gaslighter is a difficult task because, as you see, they respond with defensiveness, anger, yelling, lies, and distorting the facts. We saw with Emile. As a result, Vicky is left feeling confused and doubting her grasp on the reality of the situation. Dr. Hairston provides us with a checklist. If you are experiencing gaslighting, you might doubt your feeling, beliefs, thought, and reality, question your perception and judgment, feel alone, powerless, or inadequate, feel confused, apologize frequently, second-guess your feelings, memories, and decisions, worry that you're too sensitive or that something is wrong with you, have trouble making decisions, and think others dislike you without cause. Recognizing the harmful effects of gaslighting can be challenging, especially when one is deeply emotionally involved in the situation. When the victim of gaslighting begins to question her own thoughts and perceptions, the gaslighter is given more power, which can lead to more emotional dependency, often without one consciously realizing any of this. Vicky is simply trying to cope, maintain peace, and restore her relationship to the earlier, more romantic, blissful, loving state. The harsh reality is that that loving state, that person you long for, never truly existed. And what you are experiencing is the result of manipulation, narcissism, and a touch of psychopathy. Now, we will get back to Vicky's story shortly. Part 2, Falling, on I Survived, will be out in 2 weeks. I do have some special episodes in the works that I'll be dropping in our off weeks as I strive to give you fascinating content about the best true crime books. So thank you for listening, and I truly appreciate you joining me on this journey. I don't want to do it without you. Reminder, if you are going to CrimeCon 2026 in Las Vegas in May, you can use my code, MurderShelf, all one word, lowercase letters, to save 10% on your badge. Hey, every little bit helps. If you enjoy my podcast, please share it with friends and family and leave a positive 5-star review, especially on Apple Podcasts. Nudge, nudge. All of my sources, photographs, articles, recipes are linked on my blog at www.murdershelfbookclub.com, November 2025. If you have any questions or comments, contact me at jill@murdershelfbookclub.com or follow me on X, Facebook, Instagram, LinkedIn, and YouTube. Additionally, you can join my Patreon for $2 to $4 a month and help me choose the next book I feature, and I am teaching my serial killer class. I will see you in 2 weeks for part 2 of I Survived by Victoria Cilliers. Written and produced by Jill, all rights reserved. Music, The Pewter Elephant by Blue Dot Sessions.